Thank you for your kind introduction. As you can see, I brought my apples. I was hoping that would inspire you to see green. I know we're all looking forward to getting some fresh produce from, I come from the Niagara region, so I know the trees are in blossom and starting now. So we always want to work in terms of nutrition with finding out where people are at and building on the positive things that they're already doing. And the direction that we would hope for is nourishing your body. And, you know, everybody's going to come in with their likes and dislikes and their tastes. And we want to look at making the best decisions in terms of our nutrition with the knowledge that we have available and looking at evidence-based. I have my credentials up there as a registered dietitian. I know some people will like the title nutritionist better, but in our province that doesn't mean anything. I have 5 years of undergraduate training, and recently I did a board exam, and it's called the CSO, so especially in oncology. So I've been in oncology for about 18 years, and it's really a pleasure for me to be here with you today. So
I'm just going to mention briefly, if you have any questions, please hold on to them to the end, and we'll have a period near the end for Q&A. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, so our direction that we want to go to is nourishing our body. So at every step of our way through our journey, we want to be looking at nourishing our body. And every time you eat, like you had your beautiful lunch today, was an opportunity for you to nourish your body. And so that's the premise that we want to go to. In terms of how nutrition will work, instrumentally, like Dr. Chen was mentioning, we're looking at the microenvironment at the cellular level, that nutrients are going to be able to hopefully help us stay as strong as possible. So nutrition is very important in terms of your immunity. We're going to look at a little bit of you know, the most important aspects there. Keeping your body strong, recovering from treatment, and any side effects we're going to recover with our nutrition as well. And keeping our muscles strong as well. All right, so our aim is to look at eating as an important part of promoting our health, and we want to give our body the tools that it needs. I know this morning we were talking a little bit about the different side effects and looking at what manipulations we could be bringing in terms of how we're helping our body that way. Certainly, people want to have like a quick answer. Sometimes people wonder when they're diagnosed with the disease, do I have to change my diet? What are the recommendations? So we're going to look at a little bit of the evidence there. There are not a lot of studies specifically with nutrition and myeloma. The AICR is the American Institute of Cancer Research, and they review all of the information regarding nutrition, physical activity, and diet, and weight. And they look at releasing reports periodically for every malignancy. Unfortunately, there is not enough information with myeloma specifically for us to give direct information to be able to guide people in a better way. But we'll look at what we know. So how I was wanting to build this session with you today is to look at, like we were mountain climbers, and looking at the elements that we would bring to our care. So the first we would be to know our elements, to know what we're getting into. Second one would be to pack the right equipment for our climb. The third one would be acclimatizing, so the strategies and different setbacks that we could experience along our journey, and maybe look at some options for coping with those kind of things, but always looking at it from a positive aspect. And the last step would be perseverance and what would entail in there. So in the fall of 2018, there was a study that was released from the British Medical Journal, and it did confirm that overweight was related to incidence of myeloma. We're not exactly sure all of what that, like how the links really work, but it is one of the 13 cancers that has now been identified with overweight status. In terms of diet, as I mentioned, we're not exactly sure what specific aspects of diet or manipulation, but certainly fruits and vegetables are going to be helpful at our cellular level to give our body the phytonutrients that it needs. And there was like an observational study of a food frequency questionnaire, a study that was done in Iceland, and they did see that at least 3 fruits a day in adolescence was able to reduce the progression of the MGUS to multiple myeloma, and later in life many fruits and vegetables was also able to reduce the progression of the disease. So that's promising, I thought. And there is more and more research, and I'll give you some resources at the end if you wanted to look at more information regarding that. As you mentioned, as we heard this morning, the CRAB acronym of the calcium, renal, anemia, and bone is important with multiple myeloma. In terms of dietary manipulations, as you heard, you don't necessarily want to be doing a lot of vitamin C to overload your kidneys. So we are cautious about people supplementing with anything unless they've really spoken about it with the doctor, and you may hear me mention that a few times. We are not sure about potential interactions with medications, and we want to be extra careful that you're not unknowingly doing something that's going to hurt yourself. In 2015 in the United States, there were 23,000 ER visits related to natural remedies or vitamins and minerals and that kind of thing. I contacted Statistics Canada, and the fellow that answered me said that they don't capture that kind of information. They trend a little bit about the usage in Canada, which is growing as well, but not necessarily specifically on incidents like I found in the US. So for the renal disease, you want to be careful with the protein, the salt, and always making sure that you're reaching your fluid requirements, which is usually about 2 liters a day. So the more that you can drink your water as your best choice can help in terms of your ability for your kidneys to flush out metabolites or any kind of chemotherapy, and will help you keep your kidneys healthy, basically. There's not a lot of calcium supplementation that we recommend unless specifically that you are told by your physician as well. It is important for us to get calcium mostly through our diet and look at supplementation as a plan B for sure. Anemia is another aspect, and so then we'll look at iron-rich foods and make sure that people are meeting the requirements there. Infection is important at any stage, with especially with low counts. You want to be sure that you're clean with your preparation of food, where you're practicing good food safety for sure. So that's understanding the elements. In terms of the right equipment, we're not exactly sure. We really believe that there's no one food that will really make it or break it, really, in terms of cancer. We want to look at the variety of food. There are some good indications that the more plants you have in your diet, like the whole grains, the legumes, the fresh fruits and vegetables, the more variety that you're going to have, the more, not necessarily just the portions, but the broad nature of your diet will help your immunity mostly in your gastrointestinal tract. So that's really what we recommend. So when people want to be limiting their diet or certain food groups, we will really look at an individual approach to their preferences or their needs. And we really encourage you, if you are wanting to follow a particular diet, either from a naturopath or something you've heard. The ketogenic diet is quite popular right now. We really urge you to consult with a registered dietitian at the center where you're being seen, because you don't want to necessarily be making your muscles weak. It is really important for people to maintain their weight during their treatment, so you want to be careful that you're not losing weight. With weight loss, you would be losing muscle mass, which can make you weaker as well. So the little petri dish here is just a reminder of the variety of foods that you're supposed to incorporate, hopefully as much on a daily basis as possible. So plants. I read one thing that said base your diet on foods that come from plants and not foods made in plants. So I thought that was a good reminder. And some other aspects of guiding patients is trying to look at your plate, and would your great-grandmother recognize that as food? Like the food industry has changed a lot. The grocery stores are much bigger now. There are a lot more transformed foods that are available to us than ever before. And if you look at our biology, we're not really made to be eating foods that are such concentrated processed foods. The difference between, say, an apple, apple juice, applesauce, apple pie, you know, that kind of thing, the more transformed it is. If you try and think about your food as being in its most natural source, that's usually the best choice for you. So certainly the variety of plant foods that we have there, and I know this at our lunch today we did have quite a lot of good variety from the soup and the different side vegetables there. So we don't ask people to be perfect. What we look at as a goal, hopefully, is to look at doing the right thing 80% of the time, and that can be quite a general reminder that it doesn't have to be where you feel so deprived when you're being careful with your diet. At any juncture, you want to be looking at your habits. You want to be looking at how often do I really do that. If it's a piece of cake at a special occasion, that's different than having a cake and ice cream 3 times a week. You want to just take an inventory of where you're at in terms of your lifestyle. Some people with like a disease will make drastic changes and they feel comfortable with that. I just hope that you can kind of explore where your nutritional habits are. Sometimes if you're feeling good and you know that you could beef up a little bit the vegetables, you want to be experimenting with new vegetables. When you're feeling good, it's a good opportunity for you to explore and to get things better. Certainly the 80-20 approach applies as well when you're not feeling as well. At that time, you need to just kind of get through the hard parts. We don't ask you to be perfect then as well either. Just trying to sometimes make it through and just get your calories and be able to move on with better habits when you're able to as well. So the aspect of not feeling deprived and hopefully continuing with like a balanced approach to your nutrition in a healthy way and looking at what you're doing most times. Sometimes people want to be talking about what they did at Christmas or we just had Easter or you know, there's like a handful of special occasions we have every year. You don't necessarily need to be perfect at those occasions. We just want you to get back and to try and eat as well as possible most days, because it's the most days that are going to make the difference. It's not like you can eat well on a Friday and then let it go for the whole week. Like you don't really achieve good nutrition. It's always something you're practicing. It's always something you're going to keep in mind and trying to get comfortable with what your choices are there. As I mentioned, supplements are much better. We are to be avoided. We really need for you to get your vitamins and your minerals through your food as much as possible. Of particular importance is avoidance of green tea extract with the Velcade. It has been found to be actually negating the effect of your Velcade. So things like that, we really want you to look at reviewing all of that with your physicians and your physician team before embarking on any alternative therapies. Water is your best beverage. I'm going to have a little sip. This is my little example of doing a cheers, because we're both drinking water, right? And so the aspect there is to try and aim for about 2 liters a day for most people, and to limit caffeine and to avoid alcohol. Unfortunately, alcohol has been found to be a class 1 carcinogen. That means it's a direct causer of cancer, and so we don't really encourage people to be drinking regularly. Specifically for neuropathy or with many medications, it is contraindicated, so it would be best for you to discuss this with your physician as well. Sometimes people don't want to be hearing this advice and they want to just continue to drink as they want to. Certainly avoidance is better. If people do drink, it would be 1 standard alcoholic beverage for a woman and 2 for men as the top limit, but best to be avoided. I know people want to be drinking red wine for their heart, but that research hasn't really been what people really thought it was, right? So acclimatizing, looking at packing the right ingredients, looking forward to moving in the right direction. There are challenges that come, especially with some of the treatments and the side effects that you could be experiencing. Lack of appetite tends to be a really common thing, and it is quite complex. Often it's not necessarily just one thing that's going to help to get you through that. It's looking at small, frequent meals. It's looking at taking your time to be planning meals that are going to be appealing, looking at relaxation and a little bit of mindfulness, talking yourself into how you're nourishing your body at each time. Sometimes if you're eating a little bit smaller, at the end of the day you end up maximizing your calories because your calories are adding up to mostly meeting your requirements, whereas if you were to just spread it out into 3 meals, you wouldn't really be getting as much calories that way. So we often recommend at least about 5 to 6 small meals instead of the traditional 3 meals, especially with the low appetite. And that really helps with the nausea as well. When you're filling up your stomach with a little bit of food, it kind of can help to settle it. Sometimes you feel worse if you're running on empty too much. Yeah. And GI disturbances, as we heard this morning, a little bit of like diarrhea or constipation. There's lots of guidelines, I'm sure, available at the centers where you're treated about what to be doing in terms of fiber or how do we be adjusting your diet accordingly for that. The next one is neuropathy. There are not really any dietary manipulations that we could be really doing to help with that much. There's a few agents that have been studied, but it really didn't show the results. And hopefully with new advances we can learn more, but so far there's not really something that we recommend. And the last one on acclimatizing is blood sugar, looking at, especially with some of the steroids, you want to be just careful that your blood sugar is staying in check, and that's something that's often monitored closely as well. All right, so just a few tips on meal planning. Often just to be careful a couple of days before treatment. Sometimes you want to be avoiding heavy foods or greasy foods. It has been shown that the small frequent meals or the light choices just before chemotherapy can be helpful. Sometimes we even guide people on that, telling them to avoid their favorite thing, because sometimes if you have a negative experience with your favorite thing, then the psychological aspect of that can be a little bit of a loss, right? Where you could count on a certain food being your comfort food, and you just want to be careful with that. And the small frequent meals really helps well for the treatment days and for approximately 1 week later too. This is a little chart. I don't know if you can read all the aspects, but it looks at using fat or acid, salt, and sweet. When you're cooking and you think that your food is either too flat or too bitter or too bland, and how to be manipulating this. I'm going to give you the website for this. She's a culinary expert in oncology, and her name is Rebecca Katz, and this is from her work and what she recommends to patients. And so it's looking at how to be manipulating your actual food to hopefully get around those taste changes. So it talks about how you're using fat. Like say if you're trying to have just spinach or something like that, and you have it's a little bit bitter. Well, what can you add to that? Can you add a little bit of garlic? Can you add a little bit of salt? Can you put it in a cream soup to make it balance again a little bit? You're just looking at ways of manipulating food to be able to present it. And so I would encourage you, if you wanted to explore a little bit of this, she tries to, in her books, trying to explain it in a logical way that it can help you to kind of experiment and fix things a little bit better. So she uses a lot of dark maple syrup as a stronger sweet thing. Fatigue is another one of the biggest things that happens with treatment and any kind of medical condition. What you want to do is hopefully nourish your body with having protein more often to keep your strength up. And sometimes people even recommend like a little bit of a bedtime snack so that you're not running on empty so much overnight. Staying hydrated is a big thing. Often you can kind of just monitor the color of your pee. To be a lighter yellow tends to be a good guide to make sure that you're filling up on enough fluid to flush your body. You want to be limiting sweets when you're, sometimes people think that if they're going to have a little bit of something sweet, that'll give them energy. Well, it's not really like that. It really can make you actually even more tired. There are some meal preparation strategies that you can look up in terms of dealing with fatigue, in terms of batch cooking or getting somebody else to help, or different kind of time-saving strategies as well. And again, to be avoiding alcohol and caffeine and chocolate, especially if you're feeling exhausted. So what I would encourage you to do is look at what you're doing in terms of your diet, looking at how much plants that you're having in your daily routine. Continue to seek knowledge. Anything that works for a while, sometimes you have to go back to the drawing board and see how you can tweak things. Sometimes things, you get tired of them, or you need to think and present food in a different way to kind of get you a little bit out of a rut. We ask you to be creative, we ask you to be flexible, to be thinking of how you're really making your nutrients work for you, looking at making sure that your body weight is staying stable as much as possible. We really hope to avoid that downward spiral that people get into when they start losing weight and getting weaker, and that goes to more of a weakened immune system as well. You certainly want to celebrate anything that's working and congratulate yourself for all of the efforts that you're making in terms of nourishing your body well. And continue to find support. I thought that I didn't know a lot about Myeloma Canada, but I thought that today was really great and that you can get a lot of good support from the organization as well. So these are some of the resources that I am suggesting. So the first is the American Institute of Cancer Research, .org. You'll find there a wealth of information on cancer and nutrition, diet and physical activity, and they go through regularly looking at all the different cancers and the evidence that we have in terms of guiding patients. And there's also nice recipes there too. They have done a really good job. Sometimes working with a recipe, especially if you're dealing with a food that you don't know as much, you can get inspired, and they're usually taste tested, the recipes, so if you follow them, they work out really nicely. Unlockfoods.ca is a Canadian website, and cancerdietitian.com is American. She's a dietitian in North Carolina, and she kind of promotes good nutrition and explains things in a really concise way. The Rebecca Katz is the culinary expert that looks at taste changes and how to manipulate recipes to be presenting them in a way that can help the palate to deal with the taste of food. And then I put the Center for Mindful Eating. I really believe in, paying homage to the food that we have, slowing ourselves down, looking at every bite, and sending the message to your body that you're really nourishing your body. You're trying to feed it really well to keep it strong and healthy. I can entertain questions if you have any. Can you use the microphone?
I think I speak loud enough. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
I can't stop eating. So.
Oh, so you can't stop eating. You love to eat.
Yeah.
Great.
So that's one. I thought I should start with that. When you say liquid, so does anything aside from water and caffeine and alcohol, so tea, juices, does also count towards the 2 liter recommended?
It can count. We really like you to focus on getting 2 liters of water per day. That would be ideal. And we don't usually count the caffeinated beverages as much because we think that they're not hydrating you as much, right? Yeah. And we do caution people to have very sweet beverages. If you have the occasional juice and you have that with food, that's usually okay, but you don't necessarily want to be doing tons of juices or tons of pop or sweetened beverages like that.
You mentioned something about Velcade and green tea.
Yep.
Revlimid and green tea.
I didn't see anything related to that, of the Revlimid with the green tea.
I've got the microphone here for you.
You're referring to the green tea, was referring to the mention of green tea?
Yeah,
Extract,
yeah.
inhibiting when there's treatment. I think you mentioned something about that.
It's because we're recording. I could put it in the microphone if you want, no problem. Just a second.
Just to clarify on the green tea, is it
Yep.
green tea extract you're talking about, or is it green tea?
Yeah,
Is-
green
does
tea extract.
So green tea is okay?
If you just be careful that you're not drinking tons of it.
Okay.
The
Thanks.
occasional one's okay.
Okay, okay.
Oh, it would counteract with the action of the drug.
No, I don't, you're not supposed to have it when you have the drug, but if you're not on that drug.
Oh, no, not on that
No,
drug,
so
no.
green tea's
Yeah.
fine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just with the Velcade,
Yeah.
with the extract, yeah.
Or Dr. Lozada, did you want to?
Can you just comment on alkaline versus acidic? I know there's machines out there that will turn water to a negative, the hydrogen ion negative, and alkalize the blood. And is there some number or level that we should look to?
That alkaline diet has been around for a really long time, but unfortunately, it's not really based on science. Your body will want an actual pH for your body to survive, and you really can't manipulate your pH level. Even if you measure your saliva or your blood, it's not really something that you're changing. If you were to change your pH and you were successful, you'd die, right? Like, it's not something that your kidneys are there, your lungs are there to kind of keep you in homeostasis, so that with them functioning, you're not really going to be successful at changing your body pH.
Could you comment on purines?
Oh, purines. In terms of eating foods that have purines in them? Okay, well, I think that it has more to do with gout than with multiple myeloma, though. Do you have like a... Oh, okay, breakdown of cells.
Okay. One more question before you.
Is it?
There's one more on that.
Okay, go ahead.
In terms of a supplement that you're wanting to incorporate, we really like for you to get your vitamin C through your fruits and vegetables. And if you do well with having like the 4 fruits and 4 vegetables a day, you usually should be getting what you need. We really don't like people to supplement with vitamin C in the cancer population. As an antioxidant, maybe protecting your cells against the treatment.
I've always been told not to eat after dinner.
Okay.
We have our dinner at 6 o'clock in the evening.
Yeah.
And I have a desire to eat during the evening. And now you say that 6 small meals are better than 3 larger meals.
That's in a setting of when people have trouble with their appetite. So sometimes people will want to have like 6 small meals because that's what they like. Or how my approach was a little bit more with having like a lack of appetite. If somebody has a great appetite all day and they're eating extra at night, sometimes that can help them to gain weight. So how you want to look at your diet is to look at, I did bring a little copy of Canada's Food Guide. It's not as prescriptive as it used to be in terms of portions and that, but what you want to do is to look at mostly having your plant-based food at each of your meals, looking at getting a little bit of protein food in those meals as well, but it's not really necessary for everybody to be having like an evening snack. Like, it really depends on what else you've been doing that day.
But would it be weight producing if I had a smaller dinner and had at 8 o'clock have 8 o'clock and 10 o'clock have
Oh, okay,
a
because
couple
you
of
like to
snacks.
have a little something. If you were
Yeah.
wanting to build in a routine where you're having a little evening snack, it would be wise for you to cut back and just be careful what you're having at supper. Like, then that balances it out. It's not like having an extra something when you've already maybe eaten what you should have, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So you can kind of like play with it a little bit and see what happens with your weight.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
I've got
got two questions. So one is about green juicing. I've been hearing about like too much spinach in your system sometimes can cause renal dysfunction as well, like iron overdose. Can you comment a little bit about that? Like
Anything that you're having too much of can be like a little bit of a risk, right? So you can get, and what happens with the juicing is that, like, say, I don't know if you've ever juiced something like spinach. Like you could get like a whole, like 3 cups of spinach and it would give you this much juice, right? So it's the concentrated aspect of the juice that sometimes we don't like. If you were to have it as like a vegetable, you wouldn't really eat like that, right? Like you wouldn't have a whole pineapple at a sitting, but you could certainly juice a whole pineapple and have this much juice and drink it all. So it's the concentrated aspect that we don't like. So if you mix it up, if you do have a little bit of juice, if you have a little bit of the actual vegetables that you're eating whole, and you mixing it up a little bit, it kind of keeps you from overdoing things. But anything that is too much, like 20 apples a day, 20 of anything in a day is going to be too much, you know? Like you got to keep it in terms of the reasonable aspect of your diet as well. Yeah.
Got it. And then the second question is the whole notion around like having protein in the case of multiple myeloma in your blood. So what kind of protein to avoid and what kind of protein that can kind of...
I think it's more the amount. So hopefully with your physician looking at your body weight, you can kind of see what they aim for the number of grams of protein that you should be having in the day, and still spreading them out throughout the day is going to be important. But certainly you don't want to be overloading the kidneys with extra protein to have to excrete in the nitrogen in your urine. Yeah. Yeah.
Could we use the mic, please?
One question there first.
It's just a comment about that question. There's a lot of people that think they cannot have protein because myeloma is a disease that is caused by a protein, right, which is the antibody. But the protein you eat has to do more with the kidney function, just because it can be a bit hard on the kidneys. It doesn't have anything to do with, oh, I eat a lot of protein, so it's going to cause my myeloma to be worse. There's no such thing. If you like your beef, if you like your chicken, you can have them. There's no problem. You don't want to overdo it because you don't want to overload, stress out your kidneys, because you want to keep your kidneys nice and healthy, but it's not going to make your myeloma worse.
And the variety there is nice, that you can still have the fish and still have the food choices that you like. Just being careful with the portions, right?
I have 2 questions as well. The first one is there's a little bit of literature around turmeric and curcumin.
Yeah.
Wanted to hear your thoughts around that.
I know that it's safer for sure if people want to be cooking with it. We don't want to necessarily have people supplemented with tons of those. But I did see research even dating back, a while back, and people want to be exploring that.
And not supplementing because it's an
antioxidant, sort of.
Antioxidant?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, we're not sure, and we're not really going to be able to do clinical trials related to like who's going to fund those kind of things, and how ethical would it be for people to be taking or not, right?
Okay. Thank you. And my second question is around raw food or like salads. So
Okay.
Even when you're in remission, partial remission, should you be avoiding any like buffets or raw food and salads?
You want to be extra careful. There is the like the bone marrow restriction diet that we promote, like especially post-transplant, and for the first 100 days until your counts are recovered. But certainly it's very important at each step of the way to be very careful with your food choices.
But once you're in somewhat remission, you should always be careful, but it's not as, shouldn't necessarily.
That's right, not as restrictive, yeah.
Okay,
Absolutely,
thank you.
Yeah.
Oh, I was wondering, does cancer thrive on sugar? I'm thinking of in PET scans, they give you a sugar solution. So, thoughts?
Yeah. Sugar, okay. So the complex carbohydrates that you would find in your whole grains, in your, some of the fruits and vegetables have the complex carbohydrates. You want to look at having mostly those kind of carbohydrates and not necessarily the simple sugars like we're finding in our drinks and that kind of thing. But at the end of the day, if you don't eat any sugar, your liver puts out sugar. So that whole aspect of starving cells with not giving yourself any sweets, if you want to be limiting all sweets and not have sugar and not have cake and not have ice cream, that kind of thing, there's no amount of Canada's Food Guide of cake or recommendation for ice cream, right? Like, doesn't exist, right? So that any of those extras, if you want to be limiting all of those extra sugars, but certainly be filling up on, kidney beans that have the complex carbohydrates and a little bit of whole grain breads, and you want to be having your carrots, and you want to be having your apples and your all of the other pineapple and mango and all the other fruits and vegetables. If you base your diet on getting wholesome food, your body will get the carbohydrates from there, but you're also getting lots of nutrients with that. You don't get any nutrients from donuts really, or chips or things like that. You're kind of filling up on empty calories. They can be treats and maybe fit into a healthy lifestyle depending on how much and how often. That's why you got to have to look at auditing your food habits a little bit. But there's not an actual thing that I'm going to eat a donut and it's going to make tumors grow. It doesn't work like that. But we do know that there is more cancer in the diabetic population, and we are careful a little bit with people with diabetes when their sugar is high. We want to be sure that they're on good medication and they're following a good diet. So it's not an easy answer.
Recommendations I read that berries were good as a fruit. Do you have a recommendation for sort of the best fruits to have and the best vegetables?
Mostly we look at getting the most broad representation of the fruits and vegetable family as possible.
So no suggestions on which?
No. Get the different colors. That's always important. The dark orange, the green leafy, the berries would be a good choice because they're dark. Sort of like almost like the darker fruits and vegetable has more theoretically some phytonutrients, like if you look at cantaloupe being dark or the watermelon that we had this morning, that kind of thing.
So I made that experience, like you just have to find the right balance for yourself.
Yeah.
You get lots of recommendations, but there may be lots of fruits or vegetables what you absolutely don't like.
Yeah.
So don't stick with this. Don't get too frustrated and say, I have to eat these things because they are good for me. So after my stem cell transplant, for example, they gave me an overload with protein. And I couldn't eat that all or drink that all. And say, I just cannot have that, it's too much. So you have to find just the balance, and even if it's at that point, like if you have your appetite, you want to have a pizza, then eat a pizza. Because you need that food, right? You have no appetite at all, and to get your taste buds back, it just takes you a while.
Oh, certainly.
So I may just experience stick with take the recommendation like having fresh fruit, having fresh vegetable. They're always good for you, and then find just the right balance in your life to get these, but I still love my chocolate, and I need that, right? And you should not say, okay, because I have cancer now I cannot have all that. You need that as well. It's just the right balance.
And it's a reasonable approach,
right,
for sure, and an individualized approach. That's why it's hard to be like answering kind of general questions, but certainly if you're interested in your nutrition and you want like an individual appointment, you can speak to your oncologist or ask about the dietitians at your center for sure. But that's what we try and promote, like less food rules. And I know last year, Nutrition Month, their slogan was take the fight out of food, because it's almost like a little bit of a battleground sometimes that people want to make it, right? If food is there to be nourishing your body, you want to be friendly with your food and, kind of look at the best evidence and make good choices most days.
There's also comment around like people of after certain age, you don't really need as much dairy or eggs. Is that true, or is that so? Avoid cheese, for example. You don't need it,
at a certain age.
For elderly, typically.
Oh, elderly. Well, elderly people still need a good amount of protein. I don't know. Like the nutrition needs change. Like a young person is developing and burning more calories usually. As we age, we have less lean body mass usually, and the body kind of changes a little bit to having more adipose tissue. And certainly requirements do change with age. But I don't know that I know of a recommendation for people to be avoiding eggs or cheese in elderly. I'm not sure.
Certain high blood pressure pills.
Oh yeah.
Aged cheese, you get the tyramine.
Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, okay. I didn't know if you. I thought it was the aging person. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Oh, okay. Aging cheese. Okay. Yeah. Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah, there are specific diets based on treatments for sure. Yep.
Sorry.
And you're usually advised about those.
This thing. Oh, it does work.
As a caregiver, one of my biggest challenges was cooking for my sister. I mean, all these things that I knew she liked and that, and you'd make them, and this went on for weeks and weeks.
Yeah.
As a veterinarian, we use appetite stimulants a lot in cats and dogs. You can't force a cat to do anything. So are appetite stimulants used, say, post-transplant or when you have side effects in people at all?
They don't tend to work that well.
Okay.
And they tend to kind of almost cause the body to get fatter. And yeah, we haven't found any real good ones
Okay.
that
Well,
have
these are
been
just
effective yet.
short-term uses that
Yeah.
we use
Yeah.
to
Yeah, for sure, yeah.
support animals
Yeah.
between that. Anyways, it was easier dealing with cats, believe me.
Then your sister, yeah. And it's hard. And I know a lot of, there's a kind of a lot of stress associated with nutrition. And when you see a person that you love not eat, and how we care about people is through food, and we want to take good care of them. And it's hard to watch all of that. And it causes a little bit of discord too, like with when the patient says, well, I'm eating what I can, and their family says, oh, that's not enough. And yeah, it can be quite a lot of dynamics that come into play there.
Sorry, I just have two questions, actually. One of them is more female related, I guess, is I went into, I guess, post-menopause.
Okay.
And with the chemotherapy.
Yeah.
And I have the hot flashes.
Okay.
Are there any, I don't know, food-wise to say, like anything vegetable-wise or something to reduce hot flashes?
Not so much. I think they talk about the cool clothing, like with the cotton,
Yeah,
and the
that
the
type of
not
thing. All right.
not warm beverages, and just trying to drink cool beverages.
Just
and
get
that
through
kind
it,
of thing.
basically, which is what I've been doing for 3 years now. But
Yeah.
anyhow, and the other thing is just in terms of like freezing food, because obviously most of us go to work, and
Yeah.
like I live on my own sort of thing, so I just find it very time consuming.
Yeah.
Obviously, to prepare something that's healthy and coming home every day, you don't
Yeah.
want to be in the kitchen until like 10 o'clock at night. But if you were to freeze foods, I guess, is that
Oh, in terms of
like,
the nutrient
like
value?
pre-preparing things? And, yeah. And
Yeah,
then-
it's fine. Yeah, it's
And
great.
just-
And I went to a session, and the girl was saying how you could even like use like the flexible little muffin tins, and then just make it like the portion, like
Right.
to have smaller portions, and then that way you can pull on what you need. I thought that was good. But yeah, with freezing, the nutritional value is good. Like it won't
Okay.
damage your food or anything.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right.
Oh yeah.
Blackberries and soy-based foods, good for hot flashes. Blackberries and soy.
Any more questions?
Not really a question, but more like a cautionary tale. As a caregiver of my mother-in-law is quite elderly, and she's also comes from a East Asian background. She's has the habit of going online a lot, sort of like looking for self-remedies and stuff. So I come home sometimes and she's made a new dish, and we're sort of like, what is this? And it's something that she found online that she sort of has some mention that it might have helped her, might help her. So, and then we get sort of deliveries from family members. We got a bunch of sea cucumbers because someone had read that this might help her with her cancer. So it's hard sometimes as a caregiver to try to say, step away from searching for yourself some of these recipes. So, hopefully these websites that you've provided to us maybe I'll direct her a little bit towards those types of.
Yeah, there's a lot of information certainly on the websites, and like there's a lot of testimonials. There's a lot of different ideas that are being promoted, and unfortunately, like it's not necessarily evidence based all the time, right? So it can be difficult. But good for her for like trying, right?
No, yeah. No, as long as.
Similar, yeah. Yeah, for the amount of work it is to kind of soak beans, it can be kind of time consuming. So the canned ones are a reasonable option. Okay. You kind of rinse them off with the salt, if you will.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Just hang on a second, please.
And you mentioned a few things with supplements. So is there a role for a naturopath in the fight with multiple myeloma?
I think anytime you want to be seeking advice, you always want to be sharing everything that you're doing with your oncologist.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But
yeah, there are, you know, it's hard for us to kind of negate everything, right? So you kind of look at case by case, and always you want to be kind of assuring yourself that the person's not doing harm for themselves. But people are going to be deciding, you know, what they want and what approach that they're going to be wanting to follow, certainly. Yeah. Okay.
Is dark chocolate any better for you than milk?
Yeah, it's going to have more flavonoids, the dark chocolate, and so it would be more nutritious for sure.
Any last questions? Did you have a question? No? Yes? No? Okay.
Well, thank you very much.
Okay.